Good morning. Hi, I'm Cheryl Motor with the San Diego Accountable Community for Health.
Awesome. Barbara.
Good morning, Barbara Masters. I'm also with the Catch Initiative. We have been up until now working with the Catalyst, what we're called the Catalyst communities, but now we have an integrated cohort that we'll be managing.
And I didn't catch where that was at, Barbara?
Well, I'm located in Los Angeles, but
Okay.
the communities are statewide.
Right. Roxana?
Hi, I'm Roxana Garcia Ochoa with the West Sacramento Accountable Communities for Health.
Erin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erin from Napa County Public Health, and RACH is called Live Healthy Napa County.
I don't know which one's M. Carpenter.
Hi there, Mickey Carpenter. I'm representing our catchy site, which is Healthy San Gabriel Valley.
Oh, cool. And we've got another 213 number. Somebody from LA? Or?
Yes, that's me. Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Ryan. I'm also with Healthy San Gabriel Valley, and I just have to apologize up front. I have to leave a little early today, so if I log out, it's I'm just letting you know now.
Thanks, Jim. And another 916-3346.
I think that's Terry. She's also with our West Sac ECH.
Cool. And Heather, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself. She also might be muted. Sounds like she's having a great, or looks like she's having a great conversation.
She's having a great conversation.
Right. We should.
Heather.
No. All right. Let me just frame real quick, because the best part of this is going to be people's stories. So share here. There's asset mapping. There's a lot of different reasons people do it, and it takes a lot of forms. At the ABCD Institute, we focus on these four primary purposes of doing any sort of asset mapping. The first is to reveal and discover or uncover the strengths of a community, especially its residents and their associational life. So for us, it's really important that asset mapping can go beyond agencies and institutions or a resource directory and gets to the whole of the community's strengths, because those are often the untapped ones, which are particularly relevant in this context because they have so much to do with the social determinants of health. To develop pride and a sense of empowerment among participants, provide real data for imagining action that the community has the power to take. So the asset mapping process is really a tool for generating and presenting data that shows a community what's possible in terms of what it can do for itself, or do maybe with a little bit of outside help, but is really focused on the agency of the people who live in the community. And then the last is, and not last in order, just the fourth, is guide future relationship building that can further discover and connect assets, creating even more community power. One of my colleagues says that an asset map is a guide for learning conversations, meaning that it sort of reveals who we might better connect with and who might better connect with each other to strengthen the community. And then with any asset mapping, sometimes it's very general. It's around just overall improving community engagement, or helping a community identify what it can do to take action to strengthen itself or deal with challenges. But often there is a lens, and that's what happened in these cases. ECH sites had particular things they were looking at that they wanted to apply that lens. So they went through an asset mapping process where they still identified all the community's assets, but then they asked, how could we use these assets to address X? And each group will share with you what they did. So I'm gonna turn this off now, and We didn't talk about who would go first. I always love picking on West Sac, but sort of hometown pride. Peggy, are you willing to lead off on what you guys did? And then we'll go to Aaron in Napa and Christine in Long Beach.
Sure. I like going first. Good morning. Good morning again. And first, before I even get started, just a huge shout out to Ron and how helpful he was with everything we did, and really made us feel comfortable and prepared as we proceeded. And Roxana, feel free to jump in. I do want to say that we, as an ACH, adopted community resident engagement early on as a core value. And we had representation from residents, and we had done a really good job at making sure both West Sac and the lower income communities within West Sac had strong responses when county data was collected. That being said, the ACH had identified heart disease, and they had started to look at which risk factors we should start on. And then we kind of said, we better stop because we're moving forward without getting the resident engagement we say we're committed to. And so we called on Ron and we held a meeting with community connectors. And Ron really helped us identify who are the best community residents to have in these kind of meetings, who know what's going on, who are connected to multiple groups and efforts, and have a bit of a leadership role in your communities. And we identified very quickly from our collaborative members 12 of these community connectors for our first meeting, and they included everything from a pastor to farmers to a senior advocate to someone who worked as a navigator, but they were all also local residents. And we went through the ABCD process, and the group identified 260 community assets and kind of helped us to see that we were on the right track, because we were thinking we wanted to focus mostly initially on healthy eating and increased walkability, physical activity. And those are the focus areas that also surfaced for them. We followed that up with a second meeting, invited those same community connectors and asked them if they wanted to bring others. And Ron came again and helped us facilitate that meeting and really helped us prepare for it. So what we wanted to do at this meeting was, okay, we have these areas, how do we move forward? What steps do we take? And I was particularly anxious about that because the group really wants to activate some of these things. And I wanted to make sure that we were moving forward. And Ron really helped the group. First, he made sure that the two areas were the right areas. And a third area surfaced during that conversation around community connectedness. And so then we had 3 areas of focus, and we broke into 3 groups, and it included, each group included community connectors as well as collaborative members. And he had us really look at that area, look at what could be done, on our own, what the community members could do on their own, what they needed help with, what we needed really big support for, and what were some very simple first steps we could take to move forward. And that was so helpful. And so the group each of the 3 groups identified some first steps that they wanted to take. And the community connectors said, we want to come meet with your whole collaborative, and we want to tell them why we want to do this and why it's important. So our third meeting, follow-up meeting, was a collaborative meeting that we moved to the evening so that they would be able to attend. And they pitched their ideas, and we got some good conversations going, different connections happening, people offering support, some financial support, some technical assistance support to help those first steps to move forward. An example is we had this group around access to healthy food. One of our collaborative members has been trying to get this mobile food truck going. And listening to the community connectors and why this was important, Kaiser stepped forward and offered some support to kind of kickstart that. So that's just one example. So we have since stayed on focus with those 3 focus areas and continue to do that at every collaborative meeting and look for opportunities to move forward. So with access to healthy food, we're looking, one of these small initial steps was around people need to taste food, and where are there opportunities to taste food. We've been working with some of our community clinics around that. As I mentioned, we have the mobile food truck and a couple other things that are, again, they're the steps, and people begin to feel we are moving forward rather than being overwhelmed with a major end product and not knowing how to get there. Community connectedness, we're actually working with Andy, our communications technical support around storytelling. There was this real conversation around differences in WESAC. There's a lot of new residents, there's a lot of old time residents, a lot of diversity, ethnic diversity, and that people don't know their neighbors and they don't know what resources are in their community, and that it creates problems and creates isolation. And now that we've had that conversation, I can't open, it seems, any kind of public health publication without seeing something around isolation and its impact on health. So it was very telling that our community folks came up with that. And so we are looking into, again, trying to get some of these stories out. And also there was a desire to have some kind of an ethnic festival in the community, which I think had occurred years ago and has since not happened. And our city parks people said they also conducted surveys, and the surveys mirrored a lot of what came out of our work. And then around walkability, we've been working with the city transportation planners. We participated in a walk audit, and again, looking to identify a few steps forward and encourage the city to kind of focus on the communities we would like to see. So that's kind of what we did. I don't know if you wanted me to talk about the you know, what we felt was good, where we were going. Keep going.
Ask just, what worked well for you and what was challenging?
What worked well was having Ron facilitate.
No, in terms of asset mapping.
Well, you know, I think what worked well is it kept us focused on the positive, and it also, like I said, it helped us kind of come up with some bite-sized steps so that the group can feel like things are moving forward. And it was also pretty awesome to see all the assets. I think everyone in the room was quite surprised by that. You know, the challenge is always keeping everybody interested, both, you know, your community residents and your collaborative, without a lot of funds for implementation and without seeing outcomes, big outcomes early on. So we've got to keep people focused on, you know, incremental successes. And you know, of course, we are looking to build funds for larger implementation efforts. Let's see what else. The work is still ongoing. Actually, 2 of the community connectors now come to most of our collaborative meetings. Nice. And have been great participants. So that was a really and are playing more of a leadership role. So that's been a great outcome as well. And, you know, for our first year, we're really looking at how do we best align our existing resources to respond to the, you know, the resident actions that were identified. This mobile food van is something that we see as very promising. And let's see where else we're looking at. We're working on the storytelling, and we do have a commitment from the city to work on improved walkability. So we want to see some action there and early on, and looking to identify mechanisms to continue this resident, not just engagement, but leadership around these issues. And, down the line, of course, we hope to see bigger policy and systems change around increased participation in federal food programs and resources, a nice big multi-ethnic ongoing gathering and greater connectivity within West Sacramento among the diverse groups, improved walkability, and continued resident leadership. Roxana.
So you have a couple of residents regularly genuinely participating in the ACH. What were the elements that led that to happen? Because I think that's something everybody struggles with.
Well, we have had residents before as part of the collaborative, but their participation was kind of off and on. And I think a lot is you have your daytime meetings, and a lot of times that's difficult for residents. These two community residents are able to come during the day, so that's helpful, because we do find we lose collaborative members when we do it in the evening. So it's kind of this tricky trade-off. And I think they are engaged because I think they really feel listened to, and that what they proposed is what we're focusing on. So, I think it was really very authentic, and we're I don't know. Let me just see if Roxana, who's on the call with me, has anything she'd like to add.
Yeah, I mean, in terms reflecting back on what you just mentioned, Ron, I think, as Peggy said, they are very interested in, the work that we're trying to do. It's not something that's necessarily been done in the way that we're approaching it before. So, and I think because being community connectors, they are very involved, within the community, being longtime residents, and I think it provides us to that additional insight. And we did have one of those community connectors, now become an official collaborative member. And, we're hoping to get the second one also, officially on board. She has been coming regularly. But it's just really great to see, that level of engagement and interest, and, also having the rest of the collaborative members be supportive of that. Great.
I'll add one other thing that just happened. We were on a call with Andy, and we were talking about the storytelling, and one of our community connectors, who was a pastor in the community, has been here his whole life. He kind of brought up, so we also had our collaborative member from Kaiser on, and he was like, well, maybe we make this a big city challenge to get stories out. And he kind of brought us back, our community connector, and said, the residents are not going to come forward that quickly. They're not as trusting of the city government. I think you want to start, small, and, with the community organizations that they know and they touch every day. And, that kind of voice really reminds me that why this is so important.
That's great. I think another thing that made the success in West Sac possible was that they assigned each of their collaborative members the task of bringing 2 or 3 community connectors to the first asset mapping event, and to follow up with them and sort of personally accompany them. So there was a sense of accountability from both the collaborative members and the residents who were there. But basically at the meeting, you had these baked in relationships, which really helped us go far in the asset mapping process pretty fast. And I think helped community connectors feel like they could suggest future actions and initiatives, knowing that there was some institutional capacity in the room, as well as some resident passion. So they did a good job of identifying people, getting the right people in the room at the beginning. Let's, speaking of isolation, let's move to Napa, where that's their focus as well.
Hi, everyone. This is Erin from Napa. Thank you so much, Peggy. That was really wonderful to hear. Lots of similarities, lots of differences. I love the phrase community connectors as a title for the folks you're engaging with. Okay, so Napa is in a little bit of a different space. I don't think we are where we would like to be with community engagement in general. And I think one of the long-term goals of engaging in ABCD was really to lift up our community members to be decision makers within our collaborative, to be kind of a part of the driving forces of deciding what we were working on and what we were going to do. So we started with some asset mapping. Ron came, and I'll echo Peggy's sentiment that Ron, his facilitation and all of his knowledge was just, not only did it push the work along, but that feeling of, feeling safe and feeling secure and feeling like you had some backup, I think was really impactful for us. We started off doing an asset mapping activity with our community collaborative. We quickly realized that because there were mostly English-speaking, middle to upper class, white folks in the room, the assets that they were going to name looked very different than a lot of what our community members would say. So later on, we invited Ron back and did an asset mapping activity with a group of Spanish-speaking parents, all moms, which looked completely different. They could have been two different cities. And so that was really telling and helped sort of us realized that a lot of things needed to change in the way we did meetings. So I'll back up to our original asset mapping activity. Our collaborative really identified the associations, which are, folks who might be together because of shared experiences and are often in an unpaid status. I think Ron used the phrase they would still show up to do the work even if they weren't getting paid. And so we really decided to focus on those associations and kind of launched this huge learning conversation campaign. I, along with my teammates on our chronic disease and health equity team, a lot of our Live Healthy Napa County collaborative members, partners did them as well. We've done over 35 now, learning conversations in our community, which have truly launched a lot of the strategies and actions that will be on our community health action plan. So some of the things that came out of those learning conversations, I should say also, our big focus here is respect and social inclusion. We have 4 areas identified on our community health improvement plan, including transportation, food insecurity, housing, and then respect and social inclusion. And we decided to start with that because it just seemed like it's what kept on coming up in all of our learning conversations. It can be a lens through which to view the other parts. So you could look at RSI, I'll just use that abbreviation. You could use that as a lens to look at transportation or housing or food insecurity. So we really felt like it needed to be a priority. So many ideas, so many new narratives came out of asking people just to think about respect and social inclusion in our learning conversations. And in fact, where that led is for them to talk about transportation and housing and food insecurity, et cetera, et cetera. So we have found it to be a really valuable lens and also an approachable topic. Oftentimes when we're engaging community members and we're like, well, tell us everything about transportation, right? That maybe is a harder ask than saying, tell me about a time when you felt really included in our community. And that often really opens up a much easier, more organic conversation that always, in every one of my experiences, has gotten us to those sort of nuts and bolts conversation about the built environment or the social environment. So those asset maps are a key part of our community health improvement plan. And what we're doing right now is re-engaging those groups. Some of the things that came out of those projects that are happening in our collaborative are some human storytelling. We got a lot of feedback from folks in different communities about the stigma associated with mental health, and specifically our youth groups, and a lot of the groups that we did learning conversations with who are have mental health diagnoses felt that while there has been a lot of stigma reduction around depression and anxiety, more severe, to quote some of them, diagnoses still have a stigma surrounding them. So during May, which is Mental Health Month, we're doing a storytelling campaign. Out of a lot of our older adult conversations, what has emerged is an Ageism Summit, which will be happening in May, which we're really excited about, to sort of open the conversation about how older adults in our community are being impacted by isolation, ageism in general, but a lot of things specifically. We're doing it regionally. We're partnering with Sonoma and Marin counties as well. In our region, we have an ever-growing population of 65 plus who have diverse as well as specific needs, and we want to get a conversation going about that. We have started in conjunction with an organization called Rainbow Action Network doing LGBTQ play dates for parents and their kids, and also people who don't identify, just to get folks out in a space where they feel safe and it's family friendly. That's been a lot of really beautiful things have come out of that. One of the things that came to talking a lot of our housing insecure, unhoused population, in regards to respect and social inclusion, is they said, well, you know, I would love to go to these events, I would love to be included, but I don't have a place where I can shower. I don't have a place where I can wash my clothes. I don't have a free toilet to use. And that came up again and again as a huge barrier for folks being included, or, you know, wanting to take the bus even, right? They didn't want to be in close proximity. So one of the things that group is going to work on is sort of an inventory of free or low cost showers, toilets, washers, and dryers that are available, and also looking at some other models some other folks in counties have used to bring those services to their residents. So that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg of things we're excited about. What was good, what was challenging, what was surprising, everything about this process felt good to me. It felt like it was the right thing to do. It felt like we were walking the walk. And all of that was also incredibly challenging. I think that just being in spaces and asking people to be very vulnerable and share their stories is a challenge, right? So I think we did a lot of groundwork just in one of the sort of mandates we said when we wanted to launch in these is we didn't want it to just be one time. We didn't just want it to be, we're just going to go out one time and use our community members as information sources, and then we'll fill up our chip and our chap and kind of we'll never see them again. So one of our calls to action has been, if you're going to go someplace once, we need to go there at least twice. And just so a lot of our work now is just maintaining that connection, seeing how we can be a convener for folks. There might be some things that don't make it into our action plan, but we could still say, oh, hey, I heard you say this, and this other group is also concerned about this. So let's make some connections that might not be formally written in a plan, but it just felt important that this engagement be genuine, you know, and that both parties were going to get something out of it. I would
Can you give an example of that, Erin?
Yeah, so Rainbow Action Network is a great example of that. I'm not sure a lot of their actions of what they're doing are going to be in our community health action plan, but some of the things that a lot of groups have talked about is this idea of not like a block party, but a designated time and day where people in Napa County know folks are going to come outside of their house. And that could be something as really as simple as just like putting out your chair outside of your house. For other organizations, it's probably going to be more formal, like in regards to our disaster preparedness, saying that our neighbors are going to come out so they can get each other's phone numbers and names and learn of any specific needs. Like, oh yeah, we have a neighbor who's in her 80s and we need to make sure we're checking on her during a disaster. And so this is kind of happening in many different pockets pockets. And so our role, Live Healthy Napa County, has been to just maybe convene folks, right? Farther down the line, it might be providing some support and printing out flyers or getting media out, et cetera. But folks have really taken that and run with it. And so we've been happy to say, you do you, right? And how can we support it? But so a number of our different groups are meeting each other really informally, I should say also, you know, to push some energy around that. I think some of the cities are getting excited about it. And there's been an interesting tension there in kind of not wanting local jurisdictions to take ownership or formalize it. That's kind of been some of the sentiment from the community. So that's been an interesting process to watch. And I've also been very happy that when they have those conversations about, you know, these formal institutions, they're not talking about Link, which has been like very affirming for us. Like they kind of are still letting us in the room, which has been great. I should add, recently in December, a group of our public health team went to Designing for Social Systems. And that has been sort of a way of engagement that has just, we felt like we were so well prepared because we had been taking a deep dive into ABCD. And so we're going to use some of that design school stuff, which, I mean, they call it empathy interviewing. They're learning conversations. Yeah. It's the same thing. And so a project we're going to do based on that is, you know, our collaborative meetings are the same as Peggy's. They happen in the afternoon during the day. Most of the folks that are there are being paid. And so we're going to meet again with all of these folks that we've been meeting with and kind of talk about what are the barriers to them being engaged. And I think what it's going to look like for Link is we're going to continue to have our Link meeting during the afternoons and meet. And then my team is going to go out and we're going to have additional Link meetings, and we're going to have them in the evenings. We're going to have them be focused on the folks we're meeting with and their actions. And we also sought out and received some grant funding to remove those barriers so we can offer things like childcare and food, gift cards, et cetera. And that sort of has been our guiding star in this whole process, is just wanting Link to be a space for everyone, wanting to value people's lived experience and expertise just as much as we value the people who have the degrees in the room.
And has anything, I know it wasn't that long ago, but has anything come of the time you did the asset mapping with Spanish-speaking moms at the elementary school?
Yeah, so they're specifically interested in housing. And they haven't crystallized, you know, anything really concrete, but one of the First Five network in Napa is they're in baby steps, but they're going to be offering grants to parent groups. And they specifically just want it to be for parent groups, so unofficial organizations. And so we are helping that group of moms apply for that grant. Yeah, and helping them kind of get clear on what the funding would be used for and what it would look like. But that's been a really happy outcome of that, is just to be able to kind of provide the backbone support to help them organize. And we're helping them write the grant, and we'll kind of see them through the grant process. And then, you know, like all of these things, who knows what will happen, but we're along for the ride. We've really made it clear that we're committed, you know, that we want to support them in any way we can.
Great, thank you. Christina, you want to talk about what's happened in Long Beach? And then after Christina, we'll kind of pull these together and have some more interactive discussion and a chance for everybody to ask questions.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Christina Boatwright here in Long Beach. Our ACH is All Children Thrive. So a little bit unlike the other two who have shared, ours is not just on one particular health outcome, but it's a holistic view on what children need in our community to thrive, and it can be health, mental health, social connections, you know, reducing isolation, early education, so the kind of whole gamut. So Long Beach likes to go big when we go. So one of the things that we have recently started incorporating residents fully into our work. It's been a long time coming. It was something that we, from the beginning, absolutely wanted to have happen. We just didn't know how to operationalize it from the get-go, because we wanted to do better than our predecessors has done before. So we're really excited to be in that space. And one of the first times that residents really joined the work with the professionals in the room was during our asset mapping we had back in November. And that we saw as an opportunity to set the stage for those in our partnership to really see what is going on in our community. I think a lot of the times in the conversations we've had before, people have forgotten how asset rich we were and really just saw the deficits. And I think this is a really good exercise for the partners to see, wow, there's a lot of really great things happening in our community. There are a lot of people doing the work that we didn't know about, and that was kind of my intent, was to make sure that people knew of that, so that as we go into our portfolio of interventions development, we didn't just keep asking the same players to come into the room. We've been doing that for years, and we haven't gotten that far, and I think it really was because we didn't realize how asset rich we really were. And outside of the traditional, I'm sorry, hold on one second, I gotta turn my heater off. The way asking the ABCD exercise goes, we were able to see folks and groups who were doing the work that quote unquote people didn't see as partners. So those were the community connectors, it was the moms group, it was the other champions that we realized need to be involved in the conversations as we move into our portfolio of interventions development. So that was really, really, really helpful. And again, I'll echo what the other two groups said, that through Ron's facilitation, our partners are really bought into the ABCD mapping. They weren't necessarily 100% sure what they were getting into, and most people probably aren't.
There's a lot
when they
of
walked away,
at the beginning of that day.
Yes, and I think that just goes to say, for a very long time in Long Beach, it was very set in how we did the work. And we really have been kind of the interrupters in that space, and we've been really excited about it. It's, especially being part of local government, to be part of that interruption process, I think has been really exciting. You don't see that a lot, and so it's been fun to be able to do that. I think what was challenging is I didn't foresee, and I should have, I didn't foresee how many people were excited about All Children Thrive as a learning community, as a steering committee, and how many of those people wanted to be then part of the work. But since we were still in the formation process, though a lot has been done in our ACH, we really hadn't set in stone how we were going to take in new members and develop those level tiered of membership. Because up until this point, we've been working with our founding members, and it was just kind of invite only. And so now we had a group of people who really wanted to be part of the work, and we had to figure out very quickly what that was going to look like. And so I hope we didn't lose too much momentum, and it was kind of good that it was in the holiday time period, so it does slow down. But we now have applications that people can fill out, a membership kind of process for those who want to be part of our work. And maybe it's not on the steering committee, but they really were excited about something they heard as asset-based mapping. And so it's like an affinity group or a work group. And so we have applications for that. Our residents we're really excited to be part of those conversations. I sit in a lot of different spaces outside of our ACH around community-led efforts. And so the things that they were sharing were not new personally to me, because I'm in those spaces where they're saying a lot, but it was really good to have our executive directors here, have our decision makers here about other things that are happening. So that was really good. Surprising, I think what was surprising was that I grew up in Long Beach, so I know that we are an asset-rich city, but it was surprising to see how many of our decision makers didn't have the same feeling at the beginning of the day. Again, just being in that deficit mind frame, I think was really surprising, especially since a lot of them say they talk the talk about strengths-based, but weren't walking the walk, I guess. And so as they walked out, it was a good realization for them that, Long Beach isn't in the deficit necessarily when it comes to resourcing. Perhaps it's just how we were connecting those resources is where our challenge is. So those were our takeaways and our experience with it. We were very thankful for Ron to come out. I think the other thing, and perhaps it was because it was a shorter event and we could have maybe had another one, is that we didn't get to we saw the things that were collected and gleaned out of were the assets as in locations or institutions or people in general, but not necessarily what those people were doing or what those institutions were doing. So we still are kind of looking at the intervention mapping, as you will, and so that is something we're still trying, we hope to accomplish in March, as kind of a follow-up to that we learn about all these great organizations, but not necessarily what makes them great in those people's perspective. So those are my thoughts.
Christina, can I'm just tagging onto that, and just to clarify, is kind of what you're saying is a traditional mindset, maybe from your partners and others, right, is when you're doing mapping of interventions, you wouldn't necessarily think of the association of, university women, right, as an asset. Like, I know that came up in Napa, right? They were like, oh, we didn't even know, like, or maybe they know but didn't recognize they also cared about the same thing. Right? Is that kind of like what you're, okay. So I think that's an important point, right?
Absolutely, and it was you hit the nail on the head, is that people didn't realize that those groups or folks or whomever it was were doing similar work. I think the part that we didn't ask, or we didn't have enough time to get to, is, well, what makes them the asset? Besides them focusing in on children and families, like, what are they doing for children and families that now you see them as an asset? And so that was the one thing that we're now going back and saying, okay, if we do this again, or when we do this again, that is something we need to figure out how to capture, so that we just have a kind of a more robust understanding of what's happening.
I think the question we usually encourage folks to ask is not just what are folks doing, but what could they do? Because there's a lot of underutilized assets in a community that possibly, so there might be a mom's walking club. They may not be doing anything other than gathering and walking each day, but they're connected in their community. So what could they do if we invited them into this space, or if we brought some of our folks into their space? But it is a whole nother chunk of time after you've identified the assets and looked at where they're well connected and not connected, to say, what is it? What does each asset bring? What are their strengths? And that's often a whole nother layer that you can do with individuals, is to do some capacity inventory around some of the leaders in the community, and what's possible for them, or groups that haven't had that process of being asked, what are your strengths? So I'm thinking, Erin, of those moms. When we did that at the beginning of the time with them, around having them share their hands, head, heart, just revealed a lot of strengths in the room that might not have been talked about if we just define this as a group of elementary school moms.
Right.
So a lot of this process is helping take the boundaries off the assets that each person and or group or institution brings to the table, and looking at everything so that we can see if there's things we've left out.
I would also add that, like, in doing that exercise, it takes us out of an institutional mindset, right? Because we're used to listing our assets in this really formal way, and kind of thinking about what our agencies provide. And that was beautiful. I mean, it humanizes everyone in the room, and it's kind of a great equalizer as well. It feels more than everyone's starting at the same level once you've done that kind of sharing at the outset.
Yeah, and that's, I think, Sue sent out that exercise in the materials in the case, and I think we probably should have done this. I don't think we did that at the beginning in Long Beach. Did we do the one-on-one hands, head, heart? We did do it? Okay. It's just such a big room with so many people. In the room with the parents in Napa, what struck me was, and this never fails to strike me, but it should be predictable by now. The way we had a room with, everything from an executive director and a school board member, to a mom who had only been to one or two meetings before. And pretty quickly, everybody was just equal participants. And that happens with the asset mapping as well. When we divide folks into groups to list off assets, everybody usually has something unique to contribute to that process. So by the time we've done that 25, 30-minute exercise, there is a sense that everybody has something to contribute. I wanted to open up for folks to ask questions or make comments about the experiences of West Sac, Napa, and Long Beach and what you heard. So give some time here for that. You can either chat it in, or it would just be better if you unmuted and said it. No questions at this time? I think what I'll do then is jump to sort of sharing a little bit of the structure that we started with. Each group adapted it to their own context, but we started with this basic idea. So I'll walk through that, and please interrupt at any time. And those of you who went through this, if you're seeing stuff in my notes that you're like, I don't remember talking about that, or that was particularly helpful or particularly challenging, please jump in. So I'm going to share my screen here. And we're back to this one. If I do this right. Are you seeing the screen I shared before, asset mapping primary purposes? Yeah, okay. So no, it's not advancing. There we go. So I think of asset mapping as having sort of 4 foundational or primary steps. One is convening and hosting, which is exactly what each of these groups did. And their experience had a lot to do with how they convened and hosted, who they invited, the environment they set up, the way they welcomed folks. It was all done really well. And different in each place, but done really well. And that's a big part of it. And that's something that agencies and collaboratives can particularly offer. Asset mapping is really a key component of the success of asset-based community development efforts, and which is often very much about as Aaron said, driving decision-making into the minds and hands of residents. But it often has trouble getting off the ground until somebody convenes and hosts. And that's a gift that institutions and agencies often have, is the ability to do that. They have space. They usually can spring for pizza or sandwiches. They have some access to facilitation skills, and flip charts and markers and those kind of things. And also they're often trusted. And so people will come because they trusted who invited them. And that was definitely the case in all 3. The next piece is framing it, so people know what they're doing, why they're doing, what's coming out of it, doing the actual mapping, and then action. And I have 2 arrows in my very limited graphics abilities here. One represents that often the main group will reconvene after a while and do it again. And say, based on what we've learned, what are our assets? Let's revisit. Let's look at our connections. Is there something else we should be pursuing right now? Is there other assets that can reinforce what we've been doing? But also this other arrow is to represent that sometimes another initiative will emerge from this, and they'll do their own asset mapping around what are the assets that would particularly apply to what we're doing. So there's just steps in each one. The convening and hosting, it's a matter of place and facilitators. Invitations, which I've noted here, should be direct, not mass, meaning that folks are directly invited. Obviously, people who are paid to be part of a coalition, an email is sufficient. They know they've committed to that. They're either going to come or they're not. They're paid to be there. But getting residents involves a direct invitation. So an email might introduce it, but a follow-up phone call asking somebody when you get to a meeting in person that's why people come. If it was just an email, then they assume that that's for other people that they might be invited to come join in, but that they're not the point. Whereas the direct invitation indicates that your presence really matters. And then all the logistics really matter for this. Framing, I basically think about it in terms of these three areas. Letting people know that we're gathered to do this exercise because every community has assets, that needs never really solved a problem. And so we're trying to do what communities around the world have done, which is identify our assets and see how we can use them. People have found this method to be empowering, that it leads to action that's not dependent on outside forces or decisions, and it helps us figure out what we can do. I often will ask folks to, as they go through this process, think about, what can this community do by itself? What can we do with a little bit of outside help given all these assets, and what do we need outsiders to do? And the assets usually reveal that the community can do quite a bit for itself. Then this part's really important, reviewing the 6 asset areas and clarifying definitions. And the one that really catches people up often is the difference between associations and institutions. So spending some time talking about that. And then defining what are we mapping? A lot of times it's a particular neighborhood or defined community. In West Sac, we kind of got down to the Broderick and Bright area, noting assets that were outside of those neighborhoods, but still were available to them. And in, I think, Long Beach, we did the whole city. So just having a sense of the area being mapped is helpful to folks. Then we divide folks into 6 groups and assign each group an asset category that's usually posted on walls around the room. Sometimes it's at a table, but there's a flip chart and people can write, and I give them 5 or 6 minutes to brainstorm all the assets in that category that can be found within the defined community. After 5 or 6 minutes, ring the bell and have folks rotate. So each one is now at a new asset category, adding to what the prior group did. And I usually shorten it at that point because now people are adding on. So 4 or 5 minutes. And the last section, it might be 3 or 4. What will happen is that occasionally a group will get stuck and just be staring at the paper, and that's okay. That usually helps them have some good discussion and helps them think about, why are we not thinking of this? The one that often happens around that is culture and stories. And it's okay for them to be stuck and work through it. Usually what happens when they work through it is it's like a dam exploding and they have all kinds of ideas. So don't bail them out when that happens. Sometimes it's helpful to go around and remind them of what the category is or give them a couple examples, but that I just note that because that happens every time. Then you have the groups keep rotating until somebody's back to where each group's back to where they started. And then you ask a representative from each area to read out the assets to the whole room. And sometimes you recategorize. People will jump in and say, oh, that's probably an association, or that should be in our institution, or, oh yeah, that school you mentioned also is a physical asset, so we should note it over there. It's common for one asset to show up in several categories, and that's actually a good thing. This part often, especially for the facilitator who knew this was coming, will feel a little redundant and just kind of like, wow, people are just reading lists. But there's sort of a cumulative effect of hearing all these assets for about 20 minutes. And so go ahead and go through it, because that's where sort of the sense of aha and wonder and amazement at their own community happens. And we capture that at the end by asking people their reactions. And when they're in a hole, usually it's a big circle around the room. Sometimes it's back at the tables. Then usually, even if in a shorter meeting, like an evening meeting, we'll at least start this process, but then continue it in West Sac's case in a second process to say, what could we do with what we have? And this might be related. So in West Sac, they didn't say like cardiac health. What did you guys say, Peggy? Your thing is healthy, happy hearts. I think, is that the tagline?
Yes.
So we said, which of these assets could be used to create a West Sacramento that's filled with healthy, happy hearts? And people really dug into that and brought some great new insights into what that could be. In general community organizing, it's as broad as how could we use these assets to make our community stronger? But here it's worked really well to bring your catchy focus to it and have folks think about that. And then we ask each table to identify a couple ideas that they're particularly excited about. So we'll have people in smaller groups, like 7 or 8, do this discussion, brainstorm for a while, and then pick 1 or 2 they're excited about. In this one, it's really helpful if you have enough support staff around to have somebody at each table sort of facilitating, writing ideas down, but then also making sure that the ideas that come out of the tables aren't just the loudest person's ideas or the dominant talker's ideas, but ones that folks are really excited about. Because then what you do is you have the tables present these 1 or 2 ideas to the whole room and invite people to think about what they might want to work on. The technique I like to use here is to put them around the room and have people walk. Again, this is if there's time, and if it's a bigger group, have them walk towards what they want to work on. I think in West Sac, we had a smaller group, so we just had 3 different tables, and you went to the table that that was the project you were interested in. This is sort of a key aspect of asset-based community development, which is to recognize that the most powerful things to work on are the things people want to work on. It might not be the most important thing as identified in a needs assessment. People often will feel overwhelmed by those big things until they create some action and progress and have some success around the smaller things. So they'll, although like, this group in West Sac, we want to build better respect for the diversity of our community and better understanding, which seemed huge. And then they said, and we want to start that by having this big event where it brings people together around that idea. But they immediately were able to identify from the asset mapping which assets could help support that. And so therefore they feel like that's bite-sized enough for them and they can take it on. So this piece is just really around almost like an open space style type thing where people go to where they have passion, where they want to contribute work. And then it's important to let people have space where they don't commit to anything. But then once they're divided into these groups, that's an action team, and give folks a chance to do some planning around that. I use a basic action planning template anyone will do, but I'll share the one I use with Sue. I think we use that in West Sac and maybe in Long Beach. But the idea is that they get started on thinking about how do we use these community assets to take the action we want to take? What are our next steps? In Napa, that question was really valuable because it helped them realize that our map is not complete because it was created with just tons of privilege in the room and very few people of color and very few people from lots of the parts of the county that you wanted to work with. So they recognized that and said our first steps will be to go have learning conversations with people outside of this room to bring those perspectives in. But basically the idea is on these steps G through I, is that you're identifying what are we going to do next with this? How are we going to operationalize it, to use Christina's words? How are we going to use these assets to further engage and increase engagement of our residents? And let everybody know what will happen next. So that's the basic structure that we used for these meetings. It usually takes a couple evenings or a full Saturday to work through all these steps, and it's really dependent on having the right people in the room and the invitations that you do up front, being inclusive and intentional at the same time.
Ron, would you, I didn't see it in there in another, do you have handy a map, you know, where it has the different things that are being mapped out just to show people? Yeah. Sorry. I just think it might help just for those folks on the call that haven't seen it.
While you're looking, Ron, this is Peggy, and you did remind me when you were just going through your presentation how important it is to think about how you invite people. You know, you really helped us. You were editing our invitations and just making sure, you know, we got our collaborative members who had relationships to get involved in doing the invites, and all of that, I really think helped get the right people around the table. So I just wanted to re-emphasize that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for the asset map, so it should be easier for me to find.
That's okay. Thanks, Peggy, because I do think that's an important point. Yeah, I mean, this has been great. I think, you know, because I'm in this mindset now where I'm thinking about skill sets and competencies and knowledge and ability. So I'm kind of listening with this lens. And I think there is some similarities across what you're all doing, but it also kind of just strikes me. And Emily, I don't know if you had any thoughts, just your ability, like you all talked about this connectedness, like being able to, when I think about systems thinking, like seeing all of these different people in the room and being able to have people on your team and in the room that can, you know, see connections in a different way seems really, really important, right? I think the other thing that came out that I think is really important is that tapping into the passion. I think, you know, oftentimes we forget that, and I think that's a big thing, like in network theory, right, is, you know, you need to, you know, create spaces for people to go where their passions, because that's where they're going to do the work. And you all are, you know, working in this, you know, distributed leadership space. And I think being able to tap into that ability, right, like it just seemed really, really important. And I think just lastly, I mean, there's a whole bunch that I was capturing, but I think what Christina, you know, brought out is that oftentimes I think we will think of what an intervention is as maybe a program and not think about other types of things that could be an intervention. I'm using air quotes. And so, you know, thinking about that in a different and broader way, I think just seems really an important message here.
Thanks, Sue.
Did you find it? Sorry.
I found one.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
So there's the physical nature of the map can take any number of forms, and there's lots of examples at the ABCD Institute website, or I can share somewhere out. But this is one that sometimes people use when they have people brainstorm to themselves first before they go join a group, and they take notes in each category. But basically what we found over the years is that most community assets will fall in one or more of these 6 categories. Institutions, associations, meaning unpaid groups of folks with a common interest, individuals, culture and stories of the community, and which are often elicited by asking folks, you know, when was this community at its best? When have people come together? Where do people share a sense of community identity? Exchange refers to local economy and where people exchange gifts and skills. And then physical assets, which is the built and or natural environment. So if it's helpful, I can send this out with the PowerPoint. I'll put it in the PowerPoint, even better, one document.
Great.
Really advanced stuff here.
Great. I'm wondering for the folks that are on who maybe have done this, not with Ron, or are doing kind of other methods of engagement, or maybe thinking about this, like any reflections or any stories you'd like to share? Okay. Christy, are you, I don't know if you're speaking, but you're muted.
Zoom is calling on you by putting yellow brackets around your name.
Can you hear me okay? This is Mickey from Healthy
Hi,
San
Mickey.
Gabriel Valley.
Hi, Mickey.
Hi. So thank you so much for your presentation. We kind of fell into doing a little bit of asset mapping, and so it's great to kind of see you know, how this is done in maybe a little bit more structured way. So we're working on that piece of it. But the interesting thing is that we have a regional initiative, but then we also have a city prototype. And so I work for the city of Azusa, and I'm the lead for our city prototype. And so we were really looking for a way to connect the city with our local school district. And the idea of this kind of an asset mapping project came up because we were all kind of going to some of the same activities, and there was a lot of focus on resource guides and needs assessments, and we've been so entrenched with sort of conceptualizing how we bring an ACH model to our local city. We thought, you know, we need to think bigger picture, and we need to go beyond kind of a resource guide and think more about who we need to connect with, who we need to build deeper relationships with. And so we started doing asset mapping. We initially started to use a tool online, healthycity.org, and found that there was nothing that actually showed up. And so we knew that that was impossible. And so we engaged various groups that, again, was kind of low-hanging fruit. You know, we had our school district wellness committee, and they were super excited about the idea of an asset mapping project. We were also really inspired at the Kachi convening that we went to in Long Beach and saw the inventory, I think, that Humboldt did, their project. And we sort of marinated on that a little bit and started using the portfolio of interventions categories, and began plotting both school district and city and regional assets. And so it's kind of interesting because we were able to classify the different types of assets, but we also had another category that we added that was more individual supporters, like some of our clubs and organizations. They aren't necessarily conducting an intervention, but they are often friends of a lot of the work that we do. So that was a great project. And then since then, we've taken it to the Board of Education and got the school districts, the school board, to endorse it and basically adopt the recommendation of the District Wellness Committee to actually take it out to our parents and to the parent coffees that the principals do at all of our elementary schools. And so there's a real embracing of sort of this ongoing collaborative effort to identify assets, and we all recognize that what we want to do is use it as a guide to see, you know, where are gaps, where do we need additional assets, but also how do we strengthen those relationships that are already there. Interestingly, at our regional level of our initiative, we have a 5 hospital collaborative, and they have been, as you know, nonprofit hospitals have to do their community benefit, their community health needs assessments every 3 years, and this is the first ever time that they've all done it collaboratively across a very large region. And so we're all super excited about that because it is a big deal in our area for them to do this. And they're rolling out their collective hospital needs assessment February 6th. And what we just learned is that they are actually going to do a mapping exercise when they roll it out, because they didn't just want to focus on the deficits, I think, as was mentioned by Long Beach earlier. I think that's a huge shift in, you know, conceptualizing, you know, your action steps. And so they're going to be doing some asset mapping at this initiative. So we hope to soon see a convergence of the regional asset mapping that's taking place in our city asset mapping, and hope to get, and since then we've had other agencies that have contacted us to say, hey, we want to do our own as well. So we may have a lot of little, like, you know, asset mapping projects all over.
Yeah.
Hope to kind of tie together, because we want, everybody kind of wants to get beyond the resource guide, you know. And so anyway, I'm just really inspired when I see others doing this kind of work, because I think it does take a lot of time. It is an investment. It's sort of a, you know, I don't know if you're ever done, right? It just kind of keeps going. But it really does inspire a lot of people, I think, to focus on the strengths of a community. But that's been kind of our initial experience with some of that.
Yeah, that's really cool. A lot of good good outcomes happening there. I know Rhonda was trying to jump in, but we couldn't hear her. Sue, are you able to? Is she muted on from your end, or?
She said, I tried to talk, but you cannot hear me. I love the categories of the map. I've not used all these categories, but will from now on. And so I think that on the platform, we have the PowerPoint slides and the resources from before, and then we have a new slide deck. And so I think, you know, we'll make those available. They also, I believe, we have a bunch of Google folders that are organized by different categories. Those are on the platform. So I'll go in there and make sure all of these resources are there. What I can do for those, if it's helpful, is just send a note to say, here's where the resources are, so that you're not having to try to find them, you know, as we're doing this. So.
Great, thank you. And I'll send this PowerPoint to you to put there. I want to thank oh, there's Rhonda.
I think she's trying. She's trying to talk.
Not muted, but we don't hear her, so.
Yeah, I don't know. Technology.
I definitely want to thank the folks in West Sac and Napa and Long Beach for taking the time to think about this and present their experience, and for doing the work of keeping their collaborative members aware of the community assets and grounded in them, as well as continuing to lift up the potential for the role of residents. My sort of closing comment on asset mapping would be that often this approach is described as a way of doing positive thinking, air quotes there, around a community. And it is, but that's not because it's a decision to do positive thinking as much as a decision to focus on how people in communities experience their power. And their power comes from what they have and what they have access to, and the relationships they have to those things, which are often relationships with people who are associated with those assets. And so it's not just a matter of looking at strengths versus deficits, but it's recognizing that the power of a community to have its own agency and to act rests in the community's assets and in their connections. And so the work you're doing to help residents connect should lead to some strengthening of their ability to have agency in their community. And so, and I think that is fundamental to resident engagement. The only sustained resident engagement I've ever experienced or seen was ones that where there was a place for residents to contribute and to have a respectful role that was rooted in what they brought to the table versus what they needed or just having sort of advisory input. So I encourage you to try some things out from this process because I think it will enhance the way you engage residents.
Great. Thank you. I think just in closing, I just want to say thanks to Ron, right? I think he was, as I was describing when we started, he was one of the consultants. We also had a number of others, as well as the stipends that we made available to the participants. Just like to hear either put in the chat box or just kind of how you leave in this call, any reflections. Is this something that's helpful for you to be in a space to hear what others are doing so that you can generate your own ideas? Just love to hear any closing thoughts from y'all. Christina, thank you. It was nice to hear how other sites used ABCD. Great, thanks, Christina, and thanks so much for your time today. Any other reflections? Always good to hear real life examples. Yes, it totally is, from other communities. Okay, great. Thanks, Barb, for joining, and thanks, First Time Exposed, and it was something, maybe fascinating. Fascinating? Yeah, but thanks. Very good. Okay, well, you all have a great rest of your day, and thanks for joining us.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.